name is Yuriko, and I'm doing arts and crafts with WaWa. I bought them in Mexico City, and I didn't realize that yellow lenses are incredibly powerful. Cutting out glare at night if you're driving, during the day they do the same thing. I'm like sunshine, happiness, I'm in a better mood. I underestimated the power of yellow lenses.
Really
I could even send you the link to
Like,
these.
yes.
And they were like $60, which is not bad.
Not too bad.
Considering they're like super light. So my art and craft as just a human is to try to celebrate things and also try to speak to experiences that I've had, whether that means playing a certain song at a DJ set or making a certain piece of art or a certain design. I always think that there's a lot of opportunity and room for me to express my experiences and also like the joy that comes out of a lot of those things, and also the anger, which I find very releasing and important. And for money, the thing that capitalism pays me for is design. So I make websites, any kind of digital graphic. I do a lot of motion design, a lot of UI UX, and that's kind of what I get paid to do so I can eat.
Eating's good. I like to eat too.
Overall, I would say that I'm just all around a creative, and I like to express joy and anger.
Did either one of those come about first? Like, what did you, when you were younger, what medium did you most naturally like gravitate towards?
It was definitely art and drawing. I think a lot of us grow up and one of the first things that we enjoy doing, I think, is drawing or some sort of self-expression that happens on like a piece of paper. And then kind of as you grow up, you know, society starts to tell you like, oh, that's not really that valuable. So that kind of happened to me as I was growing up. I sort of did a lot of music. I played a lot of instruments in middle school. And then from there, when I hit high school, I was like, I'm too cool for band, which I wasn't, but you know, whatever.
I know. I think a lot of us regret that.
Yeah, I fully regret quitting music, and then I started to lean more into art and learning about art history, which I really enjoyed. And eventually I ended up on the AV club, which taught me about film, and it taught me about a little bit about sound design. And that's kind of how I decided, like, I'm going to make art my career. And here I am.
Did you have a lot of support in that? Maybe not necessarily financial, but when you began to think, I think art is going to be my career, did family and community members overall, did they get that? Or is that something that you've had to kind of show them as you've done it?
My mom, she broke a lot of traditions in our family, and traditions not in like the Christmas tradition or the whatever tradition, but more of like traditionally how women sometimes behave in communities of color or whatever. She broke a lot of those things as far as like having to leave the house when I'm married. She was very much like, no, she's gonna get to go to college if that's what she wants to do. She was also very like supportive of art and me exploring those things, and it didn't necessarily matter if she saw money in it. She was never very limiting when it came to that, and I feel like that made all the difference for me. Had my mom not believed in the fact that I could go do it, whatever it was, I don't know how far I would have gotten. Through that, though, a lot of my other family members sort of started to come around because, you know, sometimes it just, unknown is scary, right?
Yeah, sure.
And the more comfortable we just get with the unknown, I think the more comfortable we get with just letting other people explore as well around us. I don't know if I'm like making sense, But
Totally. No, totally.
yeah, but for the most part, like my mom sort of started that domino effect where she was always really protective of like my autonomy in a lot of ways, and that was incredible, and that has a lot to do with just who she is as a person. And back then, I really didn't care what my family thought about me doing art or not, because that wasn't even something I was thinking about. I was thinking about like, how do I get there? For better or for worse. I find that sometimes I have a lot of resentment out of the things that I was taught and taught to uphold, and the things that I was taught were better than everything else. I don't want to say trauma, but like something about having been told like the pinnacle of art is Europe, the pinnacle of design is whatever, and also just feeling growing up like my background was shitty. Like I was not proud of a lot of like things where I was coming from, and I wasn't, but the more I started to learn like, Renaissance history is the best art history, you know, those things started to pile up. And when I finally hit this sort of moment of just pivoting internally, I started to just really resent those things. And then I started to really lean heavily onto the things that growing up I thought like, oh, that's stupid, or oh, that's not like elevated enough, or I started to find the beauty in that. And if I hadn't ever gotten to the point to where I was angry about the things that I was taught, I don't know if I would have leaned so hard into the things that I was neglecting. And it's unfortunate in a lot of ways, but it's just part of my story now. So yes and no, in the sense that my DJ sets lean even more heavily into the things that make certain people around me uncomfortable, that don't grow up with those things, that maybe see those things as just like, you know, not as cool. I guess things are kind of changing now, but to me, in my perception and the way that I have colored the world in front of me, there's definitely an element of like anger and resentment to the things that I was taught to uphold.
Yeah.
But then that makes my joy for the things that I love and that I just didn't care about back then, it just makes it that much stronger.
Yeah.
I love where I come from, and I love the music I grew up listening to, and that's been really powerful for me.
Like a clarity. Where all of a sudden,
yeah.
Like, oh, now I know.
Yeah, and now I see the value.
And I'm not going back.
Hell no.
Yes. No, that makes total sense. Are there disciplines that help you still find joy in the design that is part of your job?
Yeah. This is interesting. I was just talking about this with someone else, in the sense that like when you make your hobby your job, things really, really start to change. It's been interesting because for a long time, this is what I wanted. I have to constantly remind myself, the girl that I was 6 years ago wanted this. And now being here and having hindsight and just some of the things that I just have to consider and deal with and think about, like if I inject too much of my culture into my corporate type design, am I selling it out? So then I don't do it, but then I feel unfulfilled because part of me feels like, well, why can't I? You know, there's a lot of like back and forth internally. It's hard for me to find the joy in my bill-paying job, because it sometimes feels like, why am I doing this when the Amazon is burning? Why am I doing this when there's indigenous resistance on Mauna Kea? Why am I doing this when there's people at the border that are being essentially just disappeared? It's really hard. And I feel like it gets entrapping. One discipline that kind of helps me with that is really enjoying my coworkers. There's still like the people aspect, and there's a lot of complexities, good and bad, in the environment that I work in, but I can honestly say like I love a lot of the people that I work with, and I love a lot of the people that I've gotten to know. And I've grown a lot because of them, and I've gotten way farther in life because of them, and it has been because of my job. So a lot of my joy at work comes from the people. That just keeps it like very honest. And you know what, at the end of the day, my job is my job, but the people are there whether the workday ends or not. So that's always like number one at work. Number 2 has been Noche Libre. I briefly mentioned last year, like, oh, it'd be so cool to DJ. I love music and I feel like I could be good at it. And Janae, so DJ Black Daria, she invited me to go get food, and she was like, just join, just join. She's like, just do it. We'll let you borrow a mixer, and just like, you can try these programs to like start mixing with, and just do it. And so a couple weeks later, I'm at my first gig for PDX Latinx Pride with Diana Suarez, who is DJ No Manches.
By the way, she says hi.
Oh, yay!
I just realized I was like, oh, I was supposed to say that.
I love her. And Emily, of course, DJ Mommy Miami, and Luz, and Fabi, who are currently not super active. But if it wasn't for just being fully embraced and not having to feel like I have to know these things, that I can just kind of like learn as I go, really started to liberate me, and it started to make me feel like, oh, I can be creative in a different way that's not for money, that's not putting food on my table. It's been like this little space that I can enter and just feel like it's fun, it's good, it brings a lot of other people together, and I get to have some really great friendships because of it. That has been super great. And then as time has gone on, I got to do like a small photo shoot with everyone, and I've been doing all the flyers for, not all of them, but a lot, or not all, but a lot. And that has just reminded me, like, I love visual craft. I just love it. Yeah. And it's been really complimentary with the music. Mm-hmm. And it's helped me express myself better. I just ramble on forever.
No, that's my line. I'm trying to learn how to more often say, thanks for listening, because I have a tendency of ending going, I just talked a lot.
Yeah.
I'm like, did you? I'm like, oh, I feel like I said what I wanted to say. So what has been the biggest learning curve for you with that particular craft?
The technical sound things. Mm-hmm. Janae and like Diana and also Tatiana are so good at it. And for me, like, that's the part that gets a little bit lost in translation. And it's not that I don't understand hardware, because I do. I built my own computer. I work in tech. Mm-hmm. But something about it being sound, or like, I don't know if it's just the environment where I come in and it's dark and whatever. I have no idea. But the sound piece, the technicalities of when people ask me like, oh, well, do you need like XLR or quarter inch, and like, I know what those things are, but in those moments I freeze up.
Yeah, in real time.
Yeah, and I'm just like, oh my god, they're gonna know that I'm an amateur. And you know what? Yeah. If they do know that I'm an amateur, that's good. Yeah. Like, it's okay to be a beginner, and it's okay to be learning something. So
it is interesting that we can know. There's a lot of things that I know better about. Like, of course you have to be a beginner to try anything.
You have to begin.
You have to begin. Like, this is the origin for everyone. But like, knowing that versus being in those spaces in real time and realizing like, I want to be good at this already, or I don't want to have to deal with the looks or the insecurities of other people wondering if I know what I'm doing. Yeah. Like, I know that this is where I have to start. I just wish it wasn't as uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's just intimidating.
So, exactly. I'm wondering if is there a light right here?
Yeah.
Above? Can I turn it on?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna keep that on so it's.
I can also turn on the other ones. I don't know if that'll reach all the way.
Dark all of a sudden, and you'd be like, oh, she's gone.
I don't know what to do with my legs. I'm like, don't know. They what?
It'll be 10 minutes of just you adjusting your feet. Keep going. Adjust your feet.
I don't know what to do.
If you were comfortable there, that's great too. I didn't know if you froze because you thought that I was starting. But what is something that you're like, you're not going to get this from just looking at my social media?
That's hard, because I'd have to assume some degree of like what people are already thinking about me through social media, and I try not to think about it too hard, even though sometimes I do. But I think there's always that first layer of like, social media always presents the best times, and I wouldn't say that I'm like exempt from that, because literally all I post is generally like quote unquote good things, or not when I'm like having a hard time or when I was going through depression. And I have shared things like that on social media because I do think it's important to have conversations. The more we talk about hard things, the easier it is to deal with them, and the easier it is for other people to also step into those places, right? Like you're giving others permission in a way to do the same. So there's a little bit of that. So you may not necessarily get me like when I'm not feeling so good about myself or whatever. And I think that's pretty natural or normal. I think another thing is, I don't know how I come across necessarily, but I do feel like in my head I tend to think that people see me as someone who's very like black or white, you know, like it's either this or it's that, because I tend to critique things a lot. The critique comes out of a place of like, I want things to be better, and so we kind of have to critique certain things in order for that to happen. Otherwise, how are we going to address anything if we're too afraid to talk about it? And I think maybe that can be intimidating, and it can also make it seem like one or the other. But generally, it's very much like, here's what I see. At the end of the day, I know me the best. I know what I think the best, and that's what I can bring to the table. And that can just be challenging, right? If you're not in the same space where you feel like you can just bring you to the table, I think it can maybe be like polarizing for how I come across. But I don't know. I'm a very nuanced person. I feel like. Oh, what? Uh-oh.
Hi. No, welcome home to your...
Hey, what? Okay. One more. Maybe I come across as very black and white, but I'm not.
Yeah, you're not. But what are the things that often cause you to procrastinate the most, or to put off creating or projects? The disruptions.
Oh yeah.
That's what yours are.
That's so funny. I think part of it is the double-edged sword of like being good at something. And it's like you feel like you can just put it off because
you're like, I got this.
Yeah, because you don't have to try too hard. So that's like a big thing for me, where I'm trying to be more disciplined in the sense that like if I'm pretty decent at this thing and I feel like I'm just sort of not putting or exerting as much time into it as I probably should be, I'm like, oh, imagine if I just was disciplined and like if I can put in the time, it would be like 10 times better. So that's like the number one thing about procrastination that like gets me every time. It's maybe a certain kind of like self-assuredness or whatever, like whatever that that a character flaw is. It definitely plays out a lot. And the other thing too is feeling like the things that I have to say are not important. And that stops me sometimes too, where I'm just like, am I just making corny shit? Or like I've already said that, or like people have already expressed the same sentiment, so like why am I gonna do it again? Like I don't have to. So there's an element of maybe caring a little bit too much about external things that are already happening. And then the other one too is in this like trifecta is feeling like, because at work I'm constantly having to exercise being critical in the work that I'm doing and strategy, and just like having to design things or like make other people's designs move. There's an exhaustion that comes from having that be my 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to make anything.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
Yeah.
So it's those three.
No, I understand. That makes complete sense. You are a very effective communicator.
Thanks.
My dad would appreciate you so much. That's like, I mean, he values many other things, but one of the things growing up for all of us kids is like, he would never just come out with it, but being able to make sure you're heard was big. So how you communicate. So it's just interesting because you're precise but not in a, like an overly calculated where it looks like you're reading a script, but in a like, I think about these things often, so when someone asks me, it's very clear. It's very clear.
A subject that we always have as people to examine is ourselves. And that's constantly what I'm doing. Yeah. And for better or for worse, it really just brings things forward for me anyway. It's an evolution, right? Because when you're growing up, people don't necessarily, or like systems that we're in don't encourage us to sit with ourselves and reflect. They don't ask us who we are, what we like, why we like it. It's a lot more of like, how can we train you to be a productive member of society? And a lot of that times that comes at the cost of your personal relationship with yourself. Yeah. And it's tough. Yeah, for me it's definitely that dialogue where I think about like, I always think about how something's going to be received and how it's going to make others feel. And it's always a game of, maybe not a game, but a conversation of how do I stop assuming things for other people, but also how do I remain conscious and true to what I know tends to happen. So in design work, a lot of it, I don't hold myself back, but I always think like, if I have something difficult to say in design that has to do with representing certain people a certain way or whatever that comes up while I'm designing with others in a team, it's a dialogue of how can I stay true to me and say what I need to say and not silence myself? How do I do it in a way that invites people into that conversation and brings, like, kind of removes like a layer of invisibility? How might that make them feel? And if those things kind of start to get really anxiety inducing, I have to remind myself like, I know me best and all I can do is bring myself to the table and put that there. And at the end of the day, I can't assume that they'll receive something good or bad. Yeah. I can have an idea and I can use that idea to sort of shape the delivery. Not always. I'm not always that thoughtful. But I try to be.
It's a goal, yeah.
Yeah, I try to be. So that's always the thing. When I'm DJing and I'm like, are people gonna connect with what I'm gonna play? Yeah. Am I gonna be just like boring? Am I gonna just completely like ruin the mood? It's always like those negative things, and I think maybe it's because DJing feels more personal. And I always have to remind myself like, you know what? If you're having a good time, that's gonna translate into the music because it's an expression of joy. Yeah. And hopefully that will be infectious to other people, whether they're familiar with the genre or the band or the language, you know? And I can't assume that they're gonna think any type of way about it. And I can only really think like, what am I gonna enjoy playing and like really be joyful about so that others can also feel that way or share that with me and I can share that with them, you know, just like a back and forth kind of thing. The anger fuels the joy, right? The anger is kind of like the log that keeps the spark burning, and I don't associate anger as a negative emotion. I see it actually as a very productive emotion, and to me it like my anger fuels me to keep giving a shit. Yeah. And by giving a shit, I can find that joy, and my joy feels that much stronger because I know that there's a lot of other stuff that is not joyful, and it makes me even more stubborn about being in that joy. And just the fact that I know I'm angry and I know there's only so much I can do about the anger, but I accept the anger into my life as part of my passion for my joy. And that makes every moment of joy just that much sweeter, because it's like, shit's fucking tough, and that's okay, because I have this too. And it's also cool that I get to share that with a bunch of other people who come to my sets and they're like, oh shit, like I haven't heard that in years, or this reminds me of growing up, or I come from a border town just like you. And it's always just kind of like, fuck yeah, like I know I'm not the only one. I know I'm not unique in this experience, and it's so comforting to find that with other people.
I just have a couple more questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, you need to go up.
Come on, lay down. This is Dewa. Dewa. She's a flea.
Perfect. Okay. What are you the most proud of at this point?
I'm really proud of the fact that, for me on a personal level, I was able to stop chasing things like money for the sake of money, or I don't know how to explain this other than there's a very sort of mainstream track of how to pursue a career or have a life, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But it does feel like it feeds into a lot of other systems in the world that are not for everyone. And I'm actually really proud of myself to have been able to meet the people that I have that have helped open up my mind and sort of lean into the things that were already there. Mm-hmm. I've always been a bit of a contrarian. I've always been kind of into politics. I've always been into reading like revolutionary books. In high school, I was like thinking I was a communist for a while, and that's fine, right? Because I read a lot of things back then. But there was a moment in my life as a young adult where I was chasing a mirage. I was chasing a mirage of what it means to be successful, of what it means to be cool. And I always felt so lost in that way. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just proud that I was able to find me with the help of so many people. It wasn't just me. I don't know that I could have ever done it alone. So I'm really proud of that I was able to recognize those things, to hear the truths that people were telling me and apply them to me. Mm-hmm. And be like, you know what? Thanks for calling that out. I need to work on that. Yeah. You know? So that is like my number one thing that I've just been like, I'm good at that. I'm good at that when it feels true.
Yeah. How do you know when to receive it? And when to not? When to be like, nah.
I think it just depends on your relationship with that person. Do you trust them? Do you have trust in their self? I don't mean like just trust another person, but do you trust that they trust who they are? Mm-hmm. And I don't have a formula for that. I don't know if everyone can do that. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I have no idea, but I've been fortunate enough to feel like I do. And it's always been people who care about me, and I feel like they care about me. It's always been people who I admire because there's something about them that signifies that they know who they are. Yeah. And when you know who you are, you typically don't tend to do things to hurt other people. You typically tend to do things to help uplift. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just been the key difference, where I'm not listening to people who are very clearly like trying to hurt me or be manipulative or whatever. And that's always a line that you have to draw personally, what feels true to you. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's just been that, like, I have one of my really close friends, I know that she knows who she is, and not in the sense like, oh, I'm never going to change and I'm always going to be this way, but in the sense that she knows she's always going to evolve. And she knows how to keep that work going. So I'm like, I want to be like that. So if she tells me something, then I'm going to really take it seriously and really examine it. You know, it hasn't been like an overnight process where someone says something and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm changing that.
Yeah.
That's not it at all. It's more of like, that's an interesting thing you just said, mm-hmm. and I'm going to sit with it. Mm-hmm. And then I can decide if it's true or not for me. And if it is, try to practice something that's going to help me either reframe whatever it is, change it, I guess, if I have to, evolve it into something else. And yeah, I don't know. It's so subjective, right?
Mm-hmm. What's the last thing you changed your mind about?
Mm-hmm. Shoot. One really big difference between Yuriko now and Yuriko since she was a teenager, and this has been an evolution. Mm-hmm. I've always had a very complicated relationship with religion. All the classic arguments against religion, not that they're not valid, but I've started to realize and see that it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what I think about religion. I'm not engaging in religion, so why does it matter, right? Other people can engage and do whatever, and that's fine, because that's not my responsibility. And it's nice to be able to see people engage in their religion in ways that makes them feel good, because it brings people together. And I feel like I understand finally why people do join religions or are religious or whatever. And it's not up to me to judge that, because everyone has their own ways of communing, of coping, of loving, and that's okay. As long as it's not inherently denying the existence of someone else, you know? I feel like, who cares? Like, I have no beef with it anymore. And I feel good about that, where I feel like someone could tell me about something religious, and yes, I can be critical, but also I can see, like, I totally see why you go, or why this is comforting, or how this helps you every day. And I think that's really good. And to have just like good relationships where I can also express some of the things that I've thought in the past, and sort of maybe release them and learn something new. If I were to boil it down, too long didn't listen, I would say that it's my thinking around what's right and what's wrong has dramatically shifted, and that's kind of what has brought about this like reframing of what religion is to me. And it's more of just like it is what it is, and that's fine. I don't know.
Hello. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use the word one more time. This was so nourishing for me. Beyond the excitement that I have about sharing this with listeners on my platforms, this was just really good for me. So thank you.